Welcome to the VandySports podcast on the 440 Sports Network. I'm your host, Billy Derrick. This week's Vanderbilt football pregame show is brought to you by the Wash House, the Murfreesboro Pure Milk Company, Sutherland and Belk, John Levin and his company Wobblebond Dickinson, and Yeaman Packaging Systems. Topics on today's show are brought to you by the Murfreesboro Pure Milk Company, family-owned third-generation milk and ice cream distribution company located in Murfreesboro. A partnership began over 50 years ago with Purity Dairy in Nashville to provide purity milk and ice cream to consumers in Middle Tennessee, and they now serve Southern Kentucky, Northern Alabama, Chattanooga, and North Georgia. Today, they supply grocery stores, convenience stores, and others with Purity products, as well as Mayfield, Nestle, and Haagen-Dazs ice cream. For more info, visit their website at mpmci.com. This week, we're previewing Vanderbilt and Ball State, Saturday night, 6 o'clock on ESPN+, also on the SEC Network Plus at First Bank Stadium. So we'll preview that matchup. We'll hear from Vanderbilt head coach Clark Lee. We'll get to storylines to watch with Joey Dwyer. Andrew Allegretta, play-by-play voice for the Commodores on the Vanderbilt Radio Network, will join us as well. And the voice of Ball State, Mick Tiro, will join us as well to preview the Cardinals as they travel to Nashville to play Vanderbilt for the first time ever. So looking forward to that as well. This week's matchup preview is brought to you by the Wash House. Are you dreading laundry day? Is it stealing time to do the things that you truly enjoy? Well, let the laundry professionals at the Wash House take care of that for you. With 2 convenient locations in the greater Nashville area, just drop off your dirty laundry, and their professional attendants will give you back the one thing you can never have enough of, your time. Log on to washhouseclean.com or stop in today and get your time back. All right, it's Vanderbilt and Ball State Saturday night. The Commodores are 4-2 overall, 2-1 in the SEC. Ball State 2-4 overall, 1-2 in the MAC. The Commodores favored by 26 on Saturday night at First Bank Stadium. Vandy returns home after winning back-to-back SEC games against number 1 Alabama and on the road against Kentucky. The Doors are receiving votes in the AP poll for the second straight week. They're ranked number 26. So if they beat Ball State, Commodores are going to be in the AP top 25. Not sure where, but they will be ranked. And knock on wood, College game day could be coming in town for the Texas game. This is the first ever meeting, as I mentioned earlier, between Vanderbilt and Ball State. The Commodores are 11-1 all time against MAC opponents. They won at Northern Illinois back in 2022, last time they played a MAC team. So Commodores have had some success against MAC teams, looking to continue that Saturday night. Last time out in Lexington, Vandy won a nail-biter, a tough, gritty defensive battle. Possessions were at a premium, as Clark Lee said, but they pulled it out 20-13. Those 20 points were the second most scored against Kentucky all season, and an elite Kentucky defense. I mean, they held Georgia to 13. They held Ole Miss to 17. Pretty good offensive day against a really good defense for Vanderbilt. I mean, not a prolific offensive day, but they did enough, obviously, to win. And the defense really ended up making the final play there with a Nick Rinaldi sack. And speaking of Nick Rinaldi, he'll join us here. He'll actually be the first interview today. So Joey Dwyer caught up with Nick Rinaldi, so we will check in with Mr. Rinaldi here in just a moment. But the Commodores' 4-2 record right now is the best start since 2008 when they hosted game day against Auburn. Again, another knock-on-wood moment. Pavia, Saturday night, finished 15 of 18. Very efficient. Again, 2 touchdowns. His 4th straight game with multiple touchdown passes. Also, a big catalyst here was Brock Taylor. He was 2 for 2 on field goals, had another 50-yarder. He's now 4 of 5 this year from 50-plus yards. The last kicker to make at least 4 50-plus yard field goals, Kerry Spear. So I think that was 2012. So, Brock Taylor, you got players making history all over the place for this Vanderbilt team. Commodores never trailed against Alabama and Kentucky. That's the first time since 1960. So this team is really rolling right now. Their offense didn't have a single 3-and-out in either win, either. First time since 2002. And Diego Pavia became the first SEC quarterback to record an 80% completion rate, at least 2 touchdown passes, and 50 yards rushing in back-to-back wins. First SEC quarterback ever to do that. So, I mean, the way he's playing right now, he is a Heisman contender. He's in a lot of top 5s. He's in some top 10s, Heisman power rankings. If you don't have him on your Heisman list, you're doing something wrong. Saturday's game day forecast. Here we go. 41 degrees is the low. Probably going to be sitting in the 50s most of the night. So might have to bundle up a little bit. Wear your pants, bring a sweatshirt, maybe a jacket. Don't think it's going to rain, so that's good. But clear skies, winds, light winds. So that's good. It won't be windy, so the wind chill won't be bad. But probably settle into the 50s for most of the night. So that's what we're looking at on Saturday night in Nashville. Let's talk a little bit about Ball State. So far this season, like I mentioned, 2-4. They opened up the season with a big win over Missouri State, 42-34, and then they rattled off 4 straight losses. They lost at Miami, 62-0. They lost at Central Michigan, 37-34, and then they lost at James Madison, 63-7. And they had a really close loss, competitive game against Western Michigan a couple of weeks back, 45-42. That could have gone either way. And then they lost. They won actually last week at Kent State, 37-35. But a one common theme here is they put up points. 42 against Missouri State, 34 in a close loss against Central Michigan, 42 in a close loss against Western Michigan, 37 last week. So again, the record may not be there, but this offense is pretty prolific. They're averaging 27 points per game. That's tied for 4th in the MAC. 339 total yards per game. That's 8th in the MAC. 229 passing yards per game. 3rd in the MAC. And 110 rushing yards per game. That's bottom half of the league. So they don't run the ball a ton, and they don't run it very successfully. But, man, they throw the ball a lot, led by Caden Samanza at quarterback, 1,348 yards this season, 67% completion rate, 12 touchdowns. He has thrown 7 interceptions, and he's also been sacked 17 times. That's 3rd most in the MAC. But I mean, that's due to they pass it a lot. They're a drop back team, and but they're also going to possess the football. They're I think one of the better teams in the country in time of possession. So they possess the football. This is a good offense that Vanderbilt's going to have to be prepared to face. Running back Braden Sloan, 423 yards this season, 4 touchdowns. But they've got an NFL tight end in Tanner Koziel, 434 yards, 3 touchdowns this season. 6'7", 237 pounds. So as we've talked about throughout this pregame show, Vanderbilt and their tight end struggles, you saw it against Georgia State, saw it against Alabama, saw it a little bit there against Virginia Tech with some of their tight ends as well. So Tanner Koziel will have to be a guy that Vanderbilt watches on Saturday night. Defensively for the Cardinals, struggling unit. They're giving up 504 total yards per game. That's 2nd most in the MAC. Also 46 points per game. That's 2nd most in the MAC. And defensively, they really struggle to defend the pass. 317 passing yards per game on this defense. That's most in the MAC conference. So this defense has struggled, but their offense has held up their end of the bargain in most of their games. So we'll see what this Ball State defense has for Vanderbilt. They're led by Keontae Newsom, 31 tackles this season. Also Brandon Berger with 4 sacks. So that's the outlook for Ball State. Let's hear from Clark Lee, though, on this Ball State matchup. Obviously, he's got a ton of respect for Mike New, but this is a game that and an opponent that Vanderbilt certainly cannot sleep on. Take a listen.
Like every Thursday, you finish the physical prep, you turn to mental prep, and just kind of the next step in our process. I think this week is just, heading into Game 7, wanting, this team to be mentally and physically prepared for what's going to be a tough battle in our stadium. And I think if we want the physical aspects of our game that we like, the speed and, again, the physical presence we've been playing with, if we want those things to show up, it's about us bringing an identity with us, our identity. It's about discipline, respect, and spirit. More disciplined play on the field. That's not just about penalties. It's about assignment sound, alignment sound, everyone in the same call, on the same page. Respect to finish out this process the right way, to double down on the mental advantages we need to create. I talked last week a lot about being behind our opponent. Now it's about how do we get ahead of our opponent by taking the time needed to study extra and to spend more time in it. And then the spirit that it takes to win games, showing up on Saturday, ready to play together and to fight for one another. Those aspects of our identity are going to be essential. And that's been the challenge I've handed the team this week. I think the prep's been good. I think we're on track. But you still have to show up on Saturday and play a good game. And so we're excited for it, but, we're going to have to go make it happen, and that is the most challenging part.
That's Vanderbilt head coach Clark Lee on Saturday night's matchup with Ball State. All right, before we get to Joey Dwyer and all the other interviews, it's time for our interview with Nick Rinaldi. Joey Dwyer had a chance to catch up with Nick earlier today, and here is that interview.
All right, Nick, tell me about Ball State. Tell me about your preparation. What do you make of them?
They're a good team. Everybody in this conference is a good team. So we're just trying to prepare right, move on from last week. I know it can be easy to get caught up in your success, but the most important thing is just to move on and get ready for the next opponent. So that's what we're doing.
Seems like they've got some good tight end play. What are the challenges of their offense for you guys?
Yeah, they have some really great tight ends. And as a linebacker, that's what you see almost the most out of anything. So just being on top of what they've done in the past and what they might do in the future based on our looks that we give, understanding their strengths and weaknesses and trying to capitalize on them.
It's obviously a big week for you last weekend in Lexington. You got on the field a little bit more than you have in the past. Just what did last weekend mean to you, especially going in and getting a win like that?
It meant a lot to me as a player, just being in my process the whole year and these past 3 years now, and finally being able to show it to the world. So I appreciate the coaches giving me the opportunity, and being able to step up in that game was big for me. And then just as a team, being able to win, take away that big win, really solidifies us as a strong opponent within the league. And I'm looking forward to what we have in the future.
Do you feel like that was almost a statement game in some ways? That Alabama game wasn't a fluke because you go and do that the next week?
Totally. Yeah, I totally agree. I think every game from now on is going to be a statement game. Proving the whole world wrong. People think, whoever might think we're still a fluke out there, continuing to prove everyone wrong, having a chip on our shoulder. I think just not being able to get caught up in your own success is the biggest thing. And so Coach Lee and Coach Lazinski, my linebacker coach, have been preaching it all week. So just being ready for the next opponent, I think, is the biggest challenge to us.
I think I've asked you this before in the fall, but did you ever imagine this would be kind of your path? Did you imagine you'd be on the field at Kroger Field on a Saturday night making plays a few years ago?
Man, 3 years ago, actually I'd say right before I came here, I did not think. If you had told me that, I would have been probably thinking you were lying to me. But then as time went on and I continued to develop as a player and person here at Vandy, I slowly started to develop those thoughts, and eventually that was my goal, to be making plays in the biggest moments on the field. And so yeah, again, just my preparation leading me to that moment and being able to capitalize on what I had in my hands. So yeah.
Obviously you came to football a little bit later, as you kind of mentioned. Tell me your story. How did you get here?
Long story, but shortened version. I hadn't played football until my senior spring of high school. I played Pee Wee, but then I stopped playing my 7th or 8th grade year, and then didn't play until my senior spring. And I say spring because COVID pushed it back to the spring up in Mass. So it was a shortened season, 5 or 6 games. And the high school coach there, Coach Ryan, had been trying to get me to play for a while. And me and a few friends thought it would be best to just screw it, go out and play football my senior year. COVID, shortened season, it all kind of made sense. It was right after basketball season, which I had been focusing on the most. And so I didn't really have to worry about injuries for that. And I went out there my senior year after I had already applied to colleges just for regular academics. And it sort of opened up a new sort of opportunity for me to get into schools that I couldn't normally get into with my academics. And so I took advantage of that. Shout out to Coach Bennett for leading me down the post-grad path. And so I went to Salisbury School in Connecticut, sort of took a leap of faith there last minute. And late August, I decided to go. And I went right down there, or up there, you could say, and immediately started playing the next day. And then we went to that season, blah, blah, blah. And then I ended up getting attention from a few schools for preferred walk-on opportunities, and Vanderbilt was one of them. And Coach DiBiase, who used to be a coach here, developed a relationship with him and decided to come here, take a leap of faith. And I'm really glad I did.
Did the idea of playing football to you almost seem kind of crazy at first? You were a guy who played a lot of different sports and probably didn't envision that.
I didn't at all. At first, I was really thinking about maybe basketball in college, at the D3 level probably, and football was never in my head. until I took that post-grad route, and coaches started putting little seeds into my mind about it. Like, really, man, like, you can play at the next level. I would always shake it off, like I didn't think they were I thought they were just tooting my horn. So next thing you know, man, like, I'm getting attention from all these big schools, and I appreciate everyone that looked at me, and especially the guys here at Vandy. I created a special connection with them, and I think they're really good in recruiting. So I'm glad about my decision, and I'm looking forward to what's next.
Tell me about Nick Rinaldi. As soon as you started playing football, were you kind of like a deer with your head cut off running around out there?
Completely. It's actually funny. You look at the old tape, it's pretty embarrassing. But the learning curve was very steep, and I really appreciate the coaches here for understanding that and seeing beyond just my mistakes maybe on the field and into my athleticism underneath that. And that's ultimately what benefited me the most was them seeing my true potential. And I had a lot of meetings with coaches about my future and where I could end up. And I really appreciate them putting that confidence into me, because coming in, it's easy to see all these good players, all these 3, 4, 5 stars ahead of you and just counting yourself out. So them being able to put that confidence into my head really helped me as a player and led me to where I am today.
Tell us about yourself as a basketball player.
Man, I mean, you could probably imagine me. I was a defensive guy. I guarded the best player typically, but it could be a point guard, could be a center. I probably fouled out most of my games, or at least ended with 3 or 4 fouls.
Did you throw some elbows?
Oh yeah, elbows, knees, all that. I was a very aggressive player. I wasn't the best basketball player, you could say. My shot wasn't knocked down. I wasn't hitting everything. I wasn't the best at dribbling, but man, I put my all out there, and I think that kind of translates to football as well. Just gritty, grinding out performances, rather than finessing everything, you might say, in basketball. So it's funny. My tape's out there if you want to watch it. It's pretty comical.
What were you, a 3, a 4?
I was wherever coach wanted me to be. It was all game planning, and wherever we needed space, it's kind of like here. I would fill in and do my job. So yeah.
Tell us about yourself as a person. What's important to you? What do you want people to know about you?
I want my friends like Langston Patterson here to look at me like I'm a good guy. No, I care a lot about academics, and so coming here at Vanderbilt really means a lot to me, and just thriving in that aspect of my life. I want to just have a good time, enjoy the moment and not let it pass by, because at the end of the day, you might think this stuff is super hard, but I'm really grateful for all the opportunities it's given me, all the doors it's opened, all the friends I've made. So I appreciate that. Sure.
All right, good stuff there from Joey Dwyer and Nick Rinaldi, who was a huge part of that win over Kentucky, filling in for Langston Patterson. Had to play a lot more, came up with a huge sack late in that game. A walk-on, Nick Rinaldi, proven that he's got what it takes to compete at the SEC level. All right, let's get going with our interview portion. We've got an interview with Joey Dwyer coming up, and then we'll send it over to Andrew Allegretta, and then we'll end it with Mick Tiro, voice of the Ball State Cardinals. Before we do that, though, our guest line is presented by John Levin, good friend of the show. Wobble Bond Dickinson, his company, they thank the student athletes at Vanderbilt University for their dedication, effort, and hard work. Our guest line is also presented by Yeaman Packaging Systems, leaders in end-of-line packaging automation. And Sutherland and Belk. If your loved one has been hurt or in an accident, give Taylor or Russell a call at 615-846-6200 to see what your rights are and if they can help. And now, on to our interview with Joey Dwyer. Kicking off our pregame show, just like we do every week, with our big storylines to watch with Joey Dwyer. Joey, Vanderbilt's a little banged up. I think they're probably the most banged up they've been all season. But it's really not me saying they're banged up right now doesn't mean they're, they've got injuries all over the place, because, they've been really good injury wise this season. But you saw Pavia, limping around on Saturday night against Kentucky. Clarkley did update his status and said that, he's been fine and he's actually ahead of where they thought he might be. We'll have a chance to talk to Clark again today. But Miles Capers, of course, unfortunately, went down with his injury. I think a lot of the thought was that it was more serious than it was, but he ended up coming back to the sideline at the end of the game. And then Christian James also went down with an injury. So, and that was a physical game, Joey. So, I mean, coming back, luckily you don't have to play another SEC team. And not saying this is a break, you still got to go out there and beat Ball State. But I'm interested to see, how do they stand physically? I think we know where they're at mentally. This team is in as good as a shape as anybody mentally right now. But I think physically is potentially where I'm worried this weekend, just the wear and tear. I mean, it happens to everybody.
Yeah, this is the point in the season where, one, physically you get really banged up, and two, again, you start to see more of what you're made of mentally, especially in a game like this that is pretty easy to overlook. I think they're going to win regardless of whether they overlook Ball State or not. But I think it's a lot of what this game will look like, and whether it's ugly or not will be a result of their intensity. I think Diego Pavia is the big storyline this week. There was even some talk that Vandy should sit him this week and just kind of let it ride out with Drew Dickey or Nate Johnson. But I think he's going to play from the sounds of it, and I think they've got to be really careful with him. Obviously, even in the Alcorn State game, he took some big hits, and if he's banged up at all, you got to be really cautious what they do with him. But if he can go, he's going to go. Clark Lee said on Saturday, short of amputation, he's going to be in the game. I actually think they got pretty fortunate with injuries against Kentucky, considering how physical that game was and considering maybe what it looked like on the surface at that game. It looked like Pavia may not play this week at that game. It looked like Miles Capers is going to be out for a while, but both those guys are guys who could potentially be in the lineup this weekend. Also, Langston Patterson's one to watch. He missed the Kentucky game. There's no availability report this weekend, so we're really not exactly sure what his status is, but maybe we'll ask about him today. It'll be interesting to see. I know we're going to talk about tight ends that Ball State has, and Langston Patterson's going to be a big factor in defending them. I thought their tackling last week was something I didn't love, especially early, and I think Langston Patterson's a big difference maker there. But we're going to talk to Nick Rinaldi. I don't know if it's already been played, but Nick Rinaldi is going to be a factor this week. Bryce Cowan's going to be a factor. Prince Colley is going to be a factor. So a lot of guys to watch in the linebacker room this weekend if Langston Patterson doesn't play. And even if he does play, I think another thing to monitor too, are they going to empty the bench a little bit if they get up in this game? It should be a game that maybe they don't win 55-0, but it should be a game that isn't particularly competitive if they bring the appropriate level of intensity and focus.
Yeah, let's get into that matchup. You mentioned the tight end, Tanner Koziel. He's one of the best tight ends in the country. He's got 46 catches for 434 yards and 3 touchdowns. He's 6'7", 237 pounds. He's going to challenge this Clark Lee defense, Joey. And Vandy gave up a lot of chunk plays to Alabama's tight ends, whether it was Dupree or Oots, I think his name is. How will they handle this matchup, especially with Langston Patterson out? And again, this is Ball State. This is not, this is not an SEC team we're talking about, but this is a prolific offense that can put points on the board with a great offensive coach and Mike New, a weapon at tight end and Tanner Koziel. This is not Alcorn State, right? And it's obviously more comparable to Georgia State with that offense. And this, this can scare some Vandy fans. But again, I'm not saying I think Vanderbilt's going to come out here and struggle, but you never know, Joey. So again, that tight end matchup is something I'm watching. We've seen Vanderbilt get gashed by tight ends before this season. I'll be interested to see how they handle that, especially with Langston Patterson likely still out, like you said.
It sounds like a Power 5 tight end to me, Billy, and I think Vandy has Power 5 linebackers. I think those are the guys that are going to be really important here. Maybe Randall Fontenette will be important as well. Guys who can kind of shadow him and at least contain him. I think he's probably going to do some damage throughout the day, but I look at Ball State's offense as one that's dangerous, but also you look at the game against Miami, they scored 0 points and lost 62-0. I mean, I don't think this team is as good as Georgia State is, to be quite frank. I think they're significantly better than Alcorn is, but I don't think it's a team that I'm super worried about beating Vanderbilt. I think I'm worried about, can Vanderbilt cover the 25.5-point spread, things along those lines. Those are the things that are going to make this a successful day. But all in all, I think you just got to get to that 5th win. I don't think it necessarily matters how you do it. I don't think it matters if it's a 10-point game. I think you just got to escape with a win. And I think if they do that, and we'll talk about this more on Saturday and throughout the week, they could probably be a ranked team next week. So there's a lot at stake this weekend for Vanderbilt. You've got to bring the, again, appropriate level of focus, and you got to be out ready to play flying around. And I think they did a really good job against Alcorn State of doing that. And I think this team is made of the right things. You've seen it every week through, except the Georgia State week. And I wouldn't expect much differently this weekend. But back to tight ends, I think they've got a lot of personnel that's able to defend them. Alabama's are obviously going to get theirs, but I think now that you're able to key in on a tight end this week in the game plan rather than having to account for Ryan Williams and every other guy on their offense who's going to hurt you, I think maybe you could see less production out of Ball State's tight end room than you normally do.
All right, last thing here, Joey. What's the main goal on Saturday? For me, it's stay as healthy as possible. I don't think the starters should be playing in the fourth quarter, and if they are, that's concerning, right? I mean, if you have to play your starters on offense and defense, that means it's a close game. You're still trying to put it away. But if they could build a big halftime lead, that'd be nice because they don't have to play most of the second half. So I think the ultimate goal, I mean, the dream scenario here, Joey, Vanderbilt gets up 35-0 at the half, which again, might be unlikely. But if they do, I don't think you see the starters most of that second half. I mean, maybe the first possession, a lot of times you'll see that. And then it's Nate Johnson time, and then it's Jeffrey Ugo time instead of Brandon Fontenette. It's, so some of the other younger guys, Lackey at corner, some of the younger defensive linemen as well, like a Jalen Ruth. So, and there's other guys, Bryson Coleman, I think could be a day for him to potentially show out, McVay and Tristan Brown. So that the main goal is to see those third stringers as early as possible, right? But also, as I mentioned, stay as healthy as possible, right? And for Pavi, I think avoid those hits. Like if you're about to take a hit up the middle, slide, right? If you're wondering if you should cut back if you're about to run out of bounds, maybe run out of bounds, right? I mean, I think just being as healthy as possible at the end of this game is the ultimate goal, but also getting guys reps. This team has better depth than I think a lot of people realized, and I want to see that depth. But more importantly, Joey, this team's got to come out of here healthy because you got the Longhorns coming in here in a couple of weeks.
That's the most important thing. You got Texas coming up. You got Tennessee. You got LSU. You got Auburn. You got South Carolina. You got to be ready to go for those games. And I think health is probably the biggest thing this weekend. Another thing, though, I think is at least perception-wise, you can't give people a reason to not rank you because I think somebody ahead of them is inevitably going to lose, and they're the next team in line unless somebody else gets a huge win who's kind of on the bubble. I mean, they just got to do enough to where their stock doesn't drop this week if they want to get ranked and if they want a chance at game day. So I think there's a lot ahead of this team, and you're really just looking at this weekend as a weekend that can't derail it, right? You're not looking at this weekend as something that is going to change the identity of the program or change the way you view the season. Got to get that one more win to inch closer to bowl eligibility, though, and you've got to do something that gives the committee confirmation bias or the AP voters. Do something that makes them think, man, this is nothing's different about this team than it was a week ago when they beat Kentucky or 2 weeks ago when they beat Alabama. Come in, take care of business, stay healthy, and I think it's a pretty successful week for Vanderbilt.
Joey, knock on wood, October 26th could be really fun. And
Billy, we could not be getting much sleep that Friday to Saturday morning.
No, but either way, it's good to have a winning product back. Obviously, I've seen it as I've covered Vanderbilt. You haven't seen it, Joey, since you've been here, but so I'm obviously probably more happy for you. But it could be really fun, and I like what you said there. I know a lot of the talk is game day could be coming. Vanderbilt could be ranked. This team has stayed laser focused. This is another challenge, Joe, because the players are thinking, man, we could be ranked. We could have game day here in a couple of weeks, but you got to play Ball State first. So that's the big challenge. But again, we'll see Ball State Vanderbilt coming up 6:00. You can watch it on ESPN Plus. I think it's also available on the SEC Network Plus as well. That's Joey Dwyer. Joey, see you Saturday. Actually today, but I'll see you Saturday too.
See you today, Billy.
All right, keeping this week's pregame show rolling with Andrew Allegretta on the Vanderbilt Radio Network, play-by-play voice in the booth for Vanderbilt football, alongside Norman Jordan and Kevin Ingram. Done a great job this season. Andrew, thanks again for joining. I got to ask, how much fun are you having? I mean, seeing the clips of you in the booth, not only the Alabama game, but the Kentucky game as well. Obviously, we know up to this point, Vanderbilt football, there haven't been many moments for things like that. And for you, but also the fans and everyone involved in the program. So how much fun are you having personally so far?
I mean, I'm having a ton of fun. I suspect absolutely everybody is having a ton of fun, specifically the past 2 weeks. As far as the booth cam is concerned, I will say that's kind of who I am in general. That's not like a far-flung situation just because we've beaten 2 teams that have been pretty special. Perhaps the animation is in slightly different tones based on the results, but there's probably some physical animation regardless. Specifically, I can think back to a particular home run last year in baseball against a team that's from Starkville that perhaps caused a little bit of consternation inside our booth. But regardless, it's been a ton of fun, and I know Vandy fans are having fun too. So I'm glad we can share the ride.
Let's talk about last week and just the build up to that Kentucky game. A lot of the talk was, how's Vanderbilt going to come back after the Alabama win? And just such a historic win for the program. But the way they came out, Andrew, is how I was really impressed. Maybe the game didn't start great for them, but I mean, you look back, it was a 97-yard drive that really I thought set the tone for that game. And defensively is where I'm looking at. Maybe the defense was at where they wanted it to be early on, but in the second half they got it to a point where the defense won the game for them with the Nick Rinaldi sack. So what did that show you about this team and their makeup, that they were able to come back right from that Alabama game and go win an SEC road game against a very physical Kentucky squad?
I mean, I think it shows a pretty focused team. I think it shows a team that's pretty committed to being successful beyond the moments and creating a season, not just a moment. That's pretty special. I'm glad you brought up Nick Rinaldi. I thought he was such a significant factor for Vanderbilt throughout the course of the game. I don't think the defense overwhelmed Kentucky, but the fact that Nick Rinaldi was so consistent for them and made that big play, and to do it without Langston available, pretty notable. I mean, I think the strength of the defense so far this season has been the success of Longwell and the success of Patterson. And we saw a lot more Prince Colley, Nick Rinaldi, and Bryce Cowan throughout the course of that game. So the fact that you could go to some depth and have that success, I thought that was pretty significant. And obviously the fact that Diego Pavia has this really the ability to just be a catalyst for focus, relentlessness, and taking it to the other opponent is really significant. I know we probably talked about this at some point during the season, Billy, but I always felt that Clark's desire for this football program is what Diego Pavia is, but perhaps he didn't have that individual player to translate it to the guys. And now that he does, you can feel that synergy between head coach and quarterback, and that's pretty powerful too.
Absolutely. What makes, you talk about the offense with Pavia, and I'm sure Norman has done a really good job on the broadcast of sort of describing, okay, here's the look, here's why they ran that, here's why Pavia kept it, which I think this is a year, to listen to the games, because Norman obviously played in an offense similar to this there with Whit Taylor back in the 80s. But what, from your perspective, makes this offense so tough to defend? And a lot of times I get asked about that, and I'm like, honestly, it's Pavia, but it's everybody, it's everything, it's the coaches, it's just everything is perfectly meshed together, and it's a well-oiled machine. I mean, Andrew, Kentucky was top 20 in the country, I think, maybe even top 10 in the country in third down defense. Now they're all the way up in the 50s in third down defense statistically after the Vanderbilt game. So, I mean, you're looking at an offense that really frustrates defenses from your perch up in the booth. What makes them so tough to defend?
Well, each of the past 2 weeks is 20 for 31 on third down conversions, which I joked with Clark back on Monday. Like, you're approaching a statistical anomaly to go 20 for 31 on third downs. And there's probably a regression to the mean at some point. But from our perch, you know what? Back up, Billy. Earlier this week, we had an event with baseball. And I asked Corbin, do you subscribe to the theory that you've got to have the right people on the bus and the right people in the right seats on the bus? That sort of team building philosophy. He goes, oh, yes. And I do think Vanderbilt, to an extent, has that, specifically with the offense. Something that's impressed me so much each of the past couple of weeks has been the ability for Tim Beck to find somebody that you do not expect and have them make a big play. It's 3 consecutive weeks. It's Joseph McVay versus Missouri. It's Cam Johnson versus Alabama. And it's Richie Hoskins versus Kentucky. My point there is, if you're a defensive coordinator or anybody playing defense, how do you clue in on anybody, right? Because somebody's going to come out of the weeds and make a really big play. And if you take a wrong step, you lost the moments. You lost the player that you were supposed to guard. So the structure of Tim Beck has been beautiful each of the past couple of weeks. And if this continues, he certainly should be in the conversation for the Broyles Award as the top assistant in college football. Like, that is bubbling up too. The other part of it is just Diego Pavia, right? You talk about Tim Beck's ability to create eye candy. Well, on top of that, you've got Diego Pavia's ability in the moment to create eye candy. Like, I was talking with Tim Beck about the AJ Newberry pass, and he went through all of the things that Diego did in that, right? Like, he steps up in the pocket. And one of the things too that he does is he looks back over his shoulder to make sure he's not going to get tackled from behind, and then continues to break out of it. There's just so much instincts within Diego Pavia that allow him to manipulate defenses. So you've got 2 guys between Beck and Pavia that just that have you on your heels. And as a defense, that doesn't work.
Absolutely not. Last thing here, Andrew. Obviously, the talk around Vanderbilt fans might not be the Ball State matchup. It's how we're going to be ranked. Is College game day coming to town? Can Texas please beat Georgia? Like we were talking about. But for this team, the talk is Ball State. This is the biggest game of the season, like they always talk about. And every week, I've asked myself, I wonder about the focus. Wonder about this team's focus this week. Well, the last 2-3 weeks, I'd say, have been. They've been laser focused. I talked to Joey earlier in the pod. I said, honestly, physically, just how beaten up, whether it's Pavia or Capers, Christian James, Langston Patterson, they're not brutally beaten up, right? But they've got some guys that
it's enough to go to your depth, Billy. It's enough to go to your depth.
Right. So that's what I'm wondering physically, Andrew. I'm not worried about this team mentally, but physically is what I'm looking at this weekend because, as fans are worried about the Texas game and maybe the LSU game later in Tennessee, these guys are locked in on Ball State.
I mean, I think we as Vanderbilt fans have our own evidence this season of what happens when you don't commit to the opponent in front of you. Like, playing in the zombie version of Turner Field against Georgia State's going to stay with us. Now, having said that, I will say, and I've said this to a lot of people throughout the course of the past couple of weeks, to quote a coach I used to work with, Willie Fritz, who, by the way, is good friends with Tim Beck because of their Pittsburgh State gorilla connection. Willie would always talk about, like, this stuff evens out. Like, you're going to pull a game that perhaps you shouldn't have won based on the situation, and maybe you're going to drop one that you should have. So some of the revisionist history of, if we had only taken care of Georgia State, like, there's a real argument to be made. Not that you want to do it, but there's elements of that day that propelled Vanderbilt football this season forward. There's no doubt. As far as Ball State is concerned, I think I'm with you. There's an element of depth that is going to start to take its toll. This season is not as bad as last season, I think, right? 8 consecutive games last year before the bye week, something like that. It was crazy. This is 6 consecutive games. So that will start to take its toll. And if you overlook Ball State, they're going to give you problems. So I don't think this program is. Like, there's an NFL tight end on this roster for Ball State. There is a ton of speed on this roster for Ball State. So if the defense isn't focused, it's going to be a pain. And Clark referenced it a couple of times. He still remembers being the defensive coordinator at Notre Dame, playing Ball State. Joey Lynch was the offensive coordinator, and they orchestrated a 19-play drive. And it stays with Clark. They got a field goal out of it, which was kind of funny, but a 19-play drive, which was just like pulling teeth. So if you're not focused and if you don't get off the field on third downs, like the defense is going to take extra snaps that they don't need to take. And that's going to stack against Texas. And that's going to stack against Auburn and South Carolina.
Great points. That's a great nugget there from that Ball State Clark Lee matchup there. We'll see what happens Saturday, 6:00 kickoff, Vanderbilt and Ball State. Andrew, thanks again. Good luck on the call Saturday.
Thanks, Billy.
Closing out this week's pregame show with Vanderbilt and Ball State coming up Saturday night, 6:00 here in Nashville. Now joined by radio and TV voice of the Cardinals. There for Ball State Sports, Mick Tiro joining me. Mick, looking forward to getting you guys in Nashville. Thanks for checking in.
Absolutely, Billy. I appreciate you having me on the show. Really excited to talk some Ball State football before the Commodores and Cardinals meet up. And it's been a whirlwind of a season this year, but really excited to get to Nashville. I've never been to Nashville, so this will be a fun experience to be able to see everything. But also really cool adventure coming up to Vanderbilt.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about Ball State before we talk about this matchup specifically Saturday night. Obviously, got a lot of respect for Mike New and what he's been able to do up there at Ball State. Tell us about this program, kind of some overall thoughts and what you've seen from your perspective so far this season. Obviously, playing in the MAC, it's it might not be the SEC, but that's obviously a really good conference as people have come to learn about that, and with a lot of fun football teams and matchups. But what can we expect from Ball State coming in Saturday? And I guess what have you seen so far from them?
Yeah, Billy, I think the biggest thing with this team right now is just the offensive identity has been very strong. The first two conference games scoring a total of 76 points, which was top 6 in program history in the first two games in American Conference history for Ball State. So you look at what they did there and followed that up with 37 points against Kent State. So what we're seeing is this offense has been extremely potent to opposing defenses in conference play. So that has been one of the biggest areas of positivity right now for Ball State. And you look at quarterback Caden Simonza, he's kind of taken that true freshman to redshirt freshman jump of commanding the offense and making sure that things run through him smoothly. So what we're seeing from an offensive standpoint has been fantastic. I think what everybody's waiting for is that defensive consistency. They've shown the flashes. It's been right there, Billy. And we saw that against Kent State when they had a turnover forced on the third play of the game with a true freshman intercepting a pass and then the offense going down and scoring in 5 plays. So there's those moments where you're seeing that all come together. And then the pass rush had 7 sacks against Kent State. So I think the defense is starting to come along. And Coach News talked about it too, is just that confidence with consistency. And once the team has that put together, I think from a defensive standpoint, you'll start to see some things change. But it's a really young defense, Billy. They had 6 new players make a start in game 1 of the season at the collegiate level. So you're just seeing what that looks like and how things are starting to transpire. But the identity of the team has been a very high octane offense and a special teams group that's been pretty spectacular too. Sam Feeney's kind of jumped off the page as somebody who's blocking punts and now playing some defense and making some sacks on the defensive end. So yeah, there's a lot of positives to draw from, and it's really 6 points, 7, 8 points. I mean, 2 losses by combined 6 points of MAC play. So you're looking at 2 scores to change the season from potentially 2-4 to 4-2. I know that's easy to talk about, but at the end of the day, like, this team has positioned itself to win all of its conference games so far. And I'm really excited to see what this challenge is for the Vanderbilt game.
Well, doing some research, it's really interesting offensively. A player that stands out, tight end Tanner Koziol. I think I'm pronouncing that right. He's among the nation's best at that position. 46 catches, 434 yards, and 3 touchdowns at 6'7", 237 pounds, which is just ridiculous for a tight end, especially at that MAC level. But there's good players all across the MAC, as we know. Vanderbilt has struggled with tight ends at times this season, whether it's against Alabama. Georgia State had a couple of tight ends that hurt them as well. Do you feel like that's maybe an opportunity for Ball State to find some success because you've got one of the better tight ends in the country?
Yeah, Tanner is always going to put teams into a pickle defensively just because of his skill set. And what I think that Tanner does so well is the consistency that he brings. He has that level of 6 to 9, 6 to 10 catches a game where it's like a guarantee that you'll see that and the targets are right there. So from that standpoint of working him into different plays and packages, I think he's done a fantastic job of doing that. And his skill set's unique because he can catch the ball at every level. It's not just, throw it to him deep, throw it to him short, throw it to medium. He's capable of doing damage from every part of the field, and that is a unique skill set for a tight end to have, especially somebody in the Mid-American Conference. I think with Tanner, no matter who Ball State's playing, Tanner's going to be somebody who can go out and make a difference on a game-to-game basis, and we've seen that. And I think this year he's been able to break out a little bit because of the connection he has with Caden, and those two they're best of friends. They spent a lot of time this offseason working together to make sure that they could be on the same page every play, every down, and that has come to fruition. In the last 4 weeks, Tanner's just been on a tear.
Yeah, I mean, been really interesting to watch. I'm looking forward to watching how those matchups progress in this game. For Ball State, looking ahead to Saturday night, for maybe a Vanderbilt fan that's coming into this game wondering what they might see from Ball State, what are the areas that you think they could have success Saturday night and that make them dangerous? You know, coming into the Alabama game for Vanderbilt, a lot of the talk was about Alabama and how much talent they have. But Clark Lee wanted to turn the focus to them, and we have to figure out what makes us dangerous. So for Ball State, what makes that team dangerous? Coming off a win, of course, over Kent State. What should Vanderbilt fans maybe be potentially worried about with this Cardinal team?
Yeah, I think with the run game being as good as it's been this year with Braden Sloan and the offensive line having that veteran experience from the last couple of years is a piece where Ball State's had success. Like that run game has changed hands in terms of who's running the football. The last 2 years, Marquez Cooper last year, and then Carson Steele the year before that. And now Braden Sloan comes in from the FCS ranks at Eastern Kentucky and has been dominant. And he had 2 touchdowns again on the ground against Kent State. So his consistency has been fantastic. And I think, Billy, when you look at what a team can do year after year in the run game, speaks a lot to how they operate within an offensive formation. And to be able to have 3 different primary backs the last 3 years all have similar type of success speaks volumes to what that offensive line can do and what the running back room can do. So I think if in Ball State's case, controlling the line of scrimmage and using some of that run game is paramount. And I think that we've seen that time of possession has been so one-sided in favor of Ball State all season long. They're one of the best teams in the country at possessing the football. And I feel like a game against Vanderbilt, a team that's really good at doing that too, and scoring, that is very key to this matchup is who wins a time of possession and who has the ball at the end of the second quarter, who has the ball at the end of the fourth quarter. Seems like those 2 scenarios have really been key in Ball State matchups this year. And to see that again against Vanderbilt, what would be a key and how that run game is able to help set that tempo and keep that tough Vanderbilt offense off the field as much as possible. And Ball State's proven that for the majority of a game, it can do that and control the pace. So we'll see how that plays out. But I think when you're talking about what can Ball State do to position themselves well, it's definitely running the ball, using play action, and owning some of that time possession.
All right, last thing here before I let you go. I think it's really interesting. Mike New has a connection with Nashville. You go back to the 1998-99 season with the Nashville Cats, the Arena Football League. He was the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach, and he spent several more years in the Arena Football League there after that, and then, of course, made his way up to the NFL. I want to say Coach Drew Brees there with the Saints in 2014 and 15. So a lot of football under Coach Mike New's belt, and I love that Nashville connection, and I know some people that still know of him and are good friends with him here in Nashville, so I like that connection. But tell us a little bit more about Mike New, and obviously he's been here for a little bit, and he's established a culture and expectations at Ball State. So what can you say about him? I know you've worked with him, but it's got to be cool working with somebody as just as good of a guy, number one, but also all the football experience he has.
Yeah, Billy, there's a lot of routes we can go within this talking point in the conversation, just because Mike has had such a great path and treated so many people well along the journey. And since we have homecoming coming up next week, I'll go ahead and share the story. The first time I ever met Coach New, I don't know if he remembers this, but I remember this. I was a student, and we have what's called the bed races at Ball State homecoming. So there will be 4 people pushing at every corner of the cart, and there's a bed on top of the cart, and you're racing down Riverside Avenue. And I was the student that was in the bed in this case, and Coach New was there. I think this was maybe his first or second homecoming. I think it was his first homecoming. And he was there just watching and seeing what the events were like. And all of us students were dressed up because there's a costume contest, a part of what this whole bed races is. And, I'm dressed up, and he sees me dressed up, and we're just having a good time. I introduced myself. And he couldn't have been any nicer for a college student that looked a little silly dressed up and took the time to talk to me and meet some people around him. And that spoke volumes to me about who Mike is as a person, because that's when I was a student, and then moved through the program as a graduate student and the sideline reporter on the radio network as a GA, and got to interview Mike at halftime and post game, and then throughout the week as well. And then moving away for 2.5 years to take another job after graduation, and then getting the offer to come back here. Mike was in my corner the entire time. And so I just think that when you have somebody like Mike that's been through the journey that he's gone through, Arena League, NFL, college ranks, he has shown that he's going to take care of people that, are part of his life. And that speaks a lot. And I think it's great that a lot of people from Ball State want to go to Nashville and enjoy the game because of the representation for Ball State, but also backing Coach New and backing the community. So that's a personal anecdote from my standpoint, but from a connection with what Mike has done throughout. I think that you mentioned Drew Brees. He was Brees' quarterback coach for a little while with the Saints, and Caden Samanza grew up idolizing Drew Brees. And so he saw a lot of what Brees did, and Coach New was coaching him. And so that when Mike took over the Ball State head coaching job, Caden had a natural fit to be able to say, well, this is somebody who worked with the guy that I wanted to be like as a kid. How can he come in and help me develop into the quarterback that I can be, and how can I help him? And it's been really cool to see those two work together and really start to make something happen, because not often you can throw a true freshman quarterback in to a situation like Ball State did. His first career start was at, reigning national champion Georgia Bulldogs. And, you have to have a lot of confidence in somebody to be able to put them in. And then Caden taking his red shirt after those first 4 games last year gave him the opportunity to really develop. And we've seen that because of the way that Mike has gone about his business as a coach, from the arena ranks to the NFL to Ball State. You just see so many small steps come together to make something special. And I think a lot of people see that with Coach New, and he always has a very, very high mark in regard to community, in regard to chemistry and locker room and all that stuff. Like there's a really good connection with those guys and Coach New. So yeah, he's built a lot of good relationships over the years, and then he's made sure that some of them intertwine when they're going after somebody like a Caden Simons in recruiting.
That's good stuff right there. A high-powered passing attack for Ball State coming into Nashville Saturday night. Again, it's a 6:00 kickoff. Mick Tidrow will be on the call for the Ball State side of things. Mick, enjoy Nashville, your first time to Nashville. I'm sure it'll be a blast for you, but looking forward to seeing the game Saturday night.
I really appreciate you having me on, Billy. Thank you so much for your time, and go Cards.
All right, that'll do it for the interview portion. Big thanks to Nick Rinaldi for being a part of the show, Clark Lee there for his comments, Joey Dwyer, Andrew Allegretta, and Mick Tiro, voice of the Ball State Cardinals. This podcast has always been free, and we plan for it to be free. So here's how you can help keep it that way. Give us a review and a 5-star rating. That helps us get noticed. If you're listening and haven't subscribed to VandySports.com, please do. It's $99 a year and $9.99 a month. That helps us tremendously. Go subscribe to our VandySports YouTube channel. Stock is high on the VandySports.com YouTube channel. We've been increasing our subscribers. Let's get it to 2,000. See if we can do that here in the next couple of months with this football team rolling. So we've got all kinds of content, rapid reactions, last-minute thoughts, press conferences, exclusive interviews. VandySports YouTube channel is the place to be. Finally, if you're interested in sponsoring the show, we need a football sponsor. Now's the time. Right now is the time to become our football sponsor. Go ahead and jump in. Email Chris Lee at chrislee70@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you again soon with more episodes of the Vandy Sports Podcast.